Moms know how to be time efficient.
But then I'm like, well, I don't want to be comfortable. I want to go out there and see what I can achieve. I want to break out of my comfort zone.
Nothing seems to change for women who get pregnant, go and give birth. It's like there's just you lose a few years.
Moms are very on the ball with everything. In careers, we're juggling businesses at the same time. It's like, where do we spend our time? And how do we make the best of the time that we've got?
There are many stories out there of strength, resilience, and courage, and we're on a mission to bring them all to you. Welcome to Empowered Voices Amplified podcast brought to you by Skilled Migrant Professionals magazine.
Our guest today is our really good friend, Alicent Wong. Yes, we do have quite a lot of friends. With over 20 years experience as a digital marketing specialist, Ali, as she's known to her friends, is the founder behind the Women of Color Founders Network. Migrating from Singapore in 2004, she's worked with brands such as CBA, Tourism Queensland, Microsoft, Apple, Johnson and Johnson's. Since moving to Brisbane in 2019 from Sydney, Ali is an account director with a digital marketing agency in Brisbane, a volunteer business mentor with the QLD government Mentor for Growth. It's a mouthful. Program, and is launching her business and career coaching business, working with women of color founders and professionals in 2024. Welcome to the show, Ali.
Thanks, Em and Sandra. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. It's going to be a lot of fun. So
Looking
I'll
forward
kick things off. So, Ali, as Em mentioned, you moved to Australia in 2004.
Mhm.
What prompted the decision to move to Australia?
Yeah, so I actually studied my bachelor in advertising and mass communications in Canberra. So I spent a year and a half in Canberra. When I first went to my mom and dad saying, I want to go and study in Australia and it's in Canberra, they were like, where's Canberra? Like unbeknownst to a lot of us, who haven't really been to this country before, we often think that Sydney is the capital of Australia and not Canberra. So like, where is this Canberra place? I was like, well, it's just the capital city of Australia. So obviously having studied there and having, spent a lot of time there, I fell in love with the country. And it's just such a different environment and space to be in because having grown up in Singapore, it literally you're growing up in an island city. You could get from one side of the city to the other side of the city in like an hour and maybe an hour and a bit tops. So when I was studying in Canberra, it just opened up my eyes because I love the country, I love the nature, and I love the slower pace. And that was mainly the reason why I moved over here and decided straight off the back of graduating that I have to somehow get back here because I just fell in love with the slower pace and just the vast amount of space and nature around me. That was when I went, all right, once I graduate, I've got to somehow find a way to get back over here.
So you I guess you had a little taste of it before you made that big decision. So
Yep.
you already probably had some measured expectations.
Mhm.
Were there any surprises for you?
I guess the difference is obviously being a student here, having very little responsibility. Because when you're a student, you're like, you just have, you do some side jobs, you get some income in, you study hard, and then you party hard as well. But the difference is when you're moving over here as a professional, you got to work hard. So I guess the difference is basically switching my mindset from being a student to being a professional working overseas. So obviously, environmentally, it's different. In terms of the culture, because I think one of the main culture shocks, if you will, when it came to me starting as a professional working in Australia was how slow paced it was, which was contradicting to what I said earlier because I moved over here because I love the slower pace. But when it came to the corporate world, I really struggled with the slower pace because back in Singapore, it's just you've got to move quick, you've got deadlines to meet, you get up, you get your stuff done, you go home, you eat, you do it again tomorrow. So everyone's very hyper focused on just getting stuff done and achieving all the things you want to achieve in life. Whereas when moving over here, being in advertising, as Em can attest to this, everything revolves around deadlines.
Mm.
So I remember having my first job over here and I was working on a big campaign. It was actually for the Australian Open.
Oh.
And we had about maybe a 2 months lead time into launching the campaign. I was the one freaking out, going, oh my God, like, why is everything not moving? Like, why are we waiting? What's this waiting for? We need to have gotten this done yesterday. So I think that was one of the biggest things I had to get accustomed to. And now I love it, I must say. Like that, it's like, okay, there's tomorrow. There is no, we have to absolutely get it done today. And if I've checked off all the stuff on my things to do today, I can actually get on to tomorrow. Because that's the Singaporean in me. Very competitive, very fast
Mm.
paced. So I think that was the biggest shift that I had to adapt to. Much as I moved over here for that sole reason, I had to really pull back and go, it's okay. Things take a bit more time. We just have to rest and relax a little bit. Things will happen. But now that I'm older and I have got two children, I'm actually loving that slower paced environment. And it's the reverse going back to Singapore. Like I always tell my dad, I'm like, why are you guys going so quickly? Like, why can't you just sit down and have a cup of tea with me? And he's like, no, we got to get here and then, by this time. So I guess that was an interesting kind of cultural shift and perspective for me that I had to get adapted to, from being a uni student to being a professional with responsibilities.
I have to say, because, Ali, you and I have had a conversation before. And when you said you moved here for the slow pace, I was like, what? Because
I
you're
know.
always on the go. So that was, that was a surprise.
Yeah, and I think that was a surprise to me because you don't know what you actually desire and if it actually fits you
Mm.
until you attain it, and then you go, well, actually, I asked for that, so now I better get used to it. As the saying goes, be careful what you wish for, right?
True,
Very much
true.
so. Yeah. And there's obviously different definitions of fast paced as well. So,
Yes,
yeah, it is
correct.
interesting. So, you co founded a boutique digital marketing agency
Mhm.
in Sydney with your husband. Tell us more about that journey.
Yeah, so that journey actually goes back to some experiences, some rather unpleasant experiences that I have encountered working in a very male dominated industry. As we know, marketing and advertising is very much male dominated, very similar to tech industries. So basically, the story stems from when I had my first daughter, Lily, and she's 10. And I was working for a digital agency in Sydney at the time. That was when I was managing Apple and Johnson and Johnson's. And I had my baby, went back to work part time after maternity leave. Basically, before going back, I had a sit down conversation with my manager and my managing director at the time saying, I'm coming back to work. However, I'm only going to be coming back for 3 days because I've got a newborn. I've got to be there. I'm a mom now. Things are different. So having that conversation prior to going back, it was all fine. I was promised I was still going to be managing the clients. I was promised I was still going to be, given the team that I was working with. However, going back, that changed dramatically. So what we agreed upon wasn't delivered when I went back to work, which was number one, utterly disappointing, and number two, incredibly frustrating because I was the very first female team member in that agency that had had a baby and have gone back. And so I guess in terms of management, they were all men in management, much as they were fathers themselves. I guess it's very different. And I was just really disappointed that they weren't honest and upfront with me. So I went back, was basically thrown into, clients. All my previous clients were taken away from me because I was part time now. They feel like I'm working part time, so I don't have that energy or commitment anymore. Which I always feel like if you were a mom going back to work, the reverse happens because you're more focused, you're more productive because you're there for a certain period of time and you have to make the most out of it. And then when you get home, that's where you get to be 100% focused on your family. However, that wasn't the case. So after having gone back for about, I would say, a few months, things were just not going well. And I was being mistreated. I was being treated as having lesser of a brain. And they were giving me smaller clients that I couldn't sink my teeth into. Like, I love big picture thinking. I love strategic thinking. I love applying that to my clients. However, I was giving a smaller suite of clients that didn't give me the opportunity to do that anymore. just because I was, being pictured as your mom, you've got half a brain now. But that was okay, because what was happening in the background is an ex-colleague of mine actually approached my husband and I a few months ago to say, I've been thinking about wanting to start an agency. Will you guys be interested to come on board? And I've always had curiosity around being an entrepreneur. My husband's parents, actually his dad had a really successful mergers and acquisition business in the Netherlands. So my husband has had exposure to entrepreneurship in his family, and that runs very deep. Whereas for me, nah, heard of it, sounds great, but have never really had that experience. None of my family members are entrepreneurs, right? And that's fine. You choose your own journey and you carve your own way. So I was like, well, let's just do it. So during that time, in the first couple of months going back, we were having those conversations already, initial conversations starting to take place. We were trying to put a team together, and there were just 3 of us at the time. So we were saying at that time, my husband would go in first, because he would go in and help basically build the foundations of the agency. And then I would, in whatever time and energy I still had left after caring for a newborn and working part-time, that I would be putting the processes in place, because I'm known as process lady. I love processes. I'm operationally very smart with that stuff, and that's where my strength was. So during the night, I remember like breastfeeding Lily in the middle of the night and like typing away furiously at the computer trying to set things up. So we were saying, the moment we land a client that was big enough to generate the revenue for me to come into the business full time, that was the time that I was going to quit. So I remember that day happened when I took a day off and we went to pitch for a really well-renowned sneaker brand. And I worked on that pitch very hard because I'm like, this is going to be it. This is going to be my getaway ticket to land of freedom, right? So I worked really hard on that pitch, and I went in pitch with my husband and my other business partner, and we got the news that we landed the business. Can't even begin to tell you how proud I was when I heard the news from the client saying, absolutely loved your pitch, you're hired.
Oh, I bet.
And I was like, okay, that's awesome. Now that the fun begins, I'm going to write my resignation letter. The resignation letter says, dear boss, I'm giving you no notice. I'm leaving. So I remember this exact moment. It's so clear to me in my head now. I said to my manager at the time, we need to have a conversation. So I went in, letter in hand, sat with him in the boardroom, and he was like, oh, what's up? So I was like, well, I'm resigning. And he was like, oh, like, why are you resigning? I was like, well, so I just laid it straight. I told him, well, things weren't happening the way it was meant to happen. When I came back from maternity, we had several conversations and none of that eventually. I'm utterly disappointed and honestly quite frustrated. So, but in the meantime, in the background, I've been working with my husband, setting up our own agency. And we have now landed a big client that's big enough for me to quit this job and go into the business full time. And his jaw literally dropped. He had no words. He was like, okay, that's really good. Very happy for you. That was all he had to say. And I'm like, and by the way, I know I have a conflict of a non-disclosure or the NDAs or the conflict of interest things that now was 6 months in the contract, say stipulating that you can't work with clients and you can't poach clients after you've left the agency. And I told him, and by the way, now I'm one of your key competitors. And once that clause expires, I'm going to come for my clients.
That must have felt so good.
That felt absolutely great. And I walked out there feeling like I was God. I was a queen for that day. And that was how the journey began into starting up the digital agency. It was very hard at the beginning, as we were growing our team. But then my husband is fantastic at what he does. He's the guy who goes out and networks, and he creates the relationships while I run the show. So for six years, almost 7, we did that. And then before we knew it, we were turning over very, very good revenue. When we sold the business, we had 15 people in the Sydney office, and all of them were pretty much there from day one. And we
Oh.
left the agency on a high because, number one, we were thinking about moving to Brisbane. Number two, there were other opportunities knocking on our door. And I also believe that, we've poured in a lot of years into that business. And my husband also felt like it was time for us to spend more time with our children, because when 2016 came along, I had my second daughter. So that was when we sold and we went, look, this is now the time to spend time with the family.
Mhm.
We've done it. We're selling it at the pivotal point of the agency. And then now we have got other opportunities, such as moving to Brisbane, such as consulting with other companies and things like that. So selling the business was not an easy decision because it is a baby.
Yeah.
A baby that basically propelled me to where I am today. And particularly for my husband, it was really hard for him to let go of
Mm.
that. But, I always believe that in life, things come and go. You take what you will and the lessons that you will from that, and then you move on to do bigger and
Mm.
better things. So yeah, so that was where things all began to start to ripple on. And I had a taste of that. And and till today I'm still very much interested in obviously setting up businesses and running my own show.
The
What's
theme
a
of
journey?
just do it seems to come up a lot, doesn't it? When people tell us
Mm.
their stories and their
Yeah.
journeys, and it's like you just have to bite that bullet and just forge ahead and do it. So well done. Having that journey, having the courage of your convictions and the confidence in what you do to make that step.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
but what a journey though, right? Like as you were talking, I was blown away by everything you were mentioning. And one particular thing though that we've realized in conversations with different people is how much nothing seems to change for women who go, women who get pregnant, go and give birth. It's like there's just, you lose a few years in terms of earning capacity. When you go back to work, it's a little bit difficult because there's this perception that you're not as good at your job as
Mm.
you were before, which I don't get because moms know how to be time efficient.
Yes, absolutely, right? Like if anything, moms are very on the ball with everything, because we've got to get the kids ready, they've got to get to school on time, they've got to get to parties on time. And while we're doing that, we're juggling careers, we're juggling businesses at the same time. So if anything, we're more hyper focused than we could ever have been prior to
Mm,
having children, just because we've got all these priorities that are pulling at us. It's like, where do we spend our time and how do we make the best of the time that we've got? Because
mm,
we've got so many things. Because gone are the days where women are just staying at home now, because the narrative have shifted so dramatically
yeah,
in the past few years. A lot of dads are stay-at-home dads now. Because my
yeah.
my husband was a stay-at-home dad for a few years
Mm,
after we sold the business, and he was building another business on the side, whereas I was consulting,
mm,
and he absolutely loved that. That's where roles have shifted,
yeah.
and I think more and more now families are starting to adapt that. And it's because I also think that women are now embracing their identities again, because there is always that loss of identity when we become moms.
Mm,
And it's also the stigma that we're always having to grapple with. If you are a mom, you are not entitled to work or chase your career dreams anymore or build businesses, because then you're looked upon as you're not a good enough mom because you're
yeah.
not there for your children 24/7. And the other angle is true as well. Like if you're really successful in your career and your business, then you've got to sacrifice being a mother. Why can't we ever
Can,
have that balance of, you can have this but then you can have that too? And I
yeah.
think as women, it's always compromising, isn't it? Like I always feel like society expects us to compromise. If you are really successful professionally, means that you're not a good mom. But if you're a really good mom, then you can't be successful professionally.
Exactly.
Which is something that I don't get, because I see women like yourself and
Mm,
myself and my network of women, and they're all doing fantastic things.
yes.
And they are great moms at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not one thing, are we?
No, we are not. I mean, we can't be pigeonholed into the one thing. I think it's just, again, we just love slapping labels and everything, right? And
Yeah.
if we can't find the right label for something because we challenge the norms, we get put into the outcast or we get put into the you don't belong in this basket, you're a bit different, so we're scared of you.
Oh, well, they're not burning us at the stake anymore, I suppose. So
That's
little
a good
baby
thing.
steps.
Well, Ali, I know one thing that you're passionate about is diversity and inclusion. And, we've just been talking about moms going back to work and women, doing what they love doing and still balancing that with how they feel about or how much they participate in families. And funny enough, men are never asked, like dads are never asked. But anyway, conversation for another time. So, and you're the founder of the Women of Color Founders Network.
Mhm.
What role do you see diversity and inclusion playing in the broader economy of Australia?
Yeah, I think, in terms of DEI, I know there is a bigger awareness and, organizations are starting to understand it a little bit more. But I still feel that there's so much more work to be done. Because if you come to think about it, right, Australia's population is more and more culturally diverse. We have 3.3% of the population who identify as Indigenous. Almost 30% are born overseas. And almost 21% of the population have a parent who is born overseas. But yet, in 2021, I read a report by the Creative Co-op and they did this research and study. In 2021, we had a groundbreaking track record of $10 billion being raised in terms of venture capital. And only 0.03% was assessed by Black women and women of color.
Wow.
So do you see that massive gap there?
Wow. Mm,
So this is something that I feel like that gap should be so much more closer
yeah.
today. If more organizations and more people are aware of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But just seeing that shocking data is showing me that there's just not enough that's being done at the moment. I know there's lots of organizations out there that are saying that they want to do DEI, but doing DEI properly instead of checking a box is
Mm,
very different. And the way organizations need to approach DEI is not like a slap on the wrist. We haven't been doing this, let's do this. It needs to be an all encompassing cultural shift that needs to take place in organizations. So, your Anglo Saxon employees are not going to think like they are being punished because of the lack of practice in DEI. I think it needs to be an all inclusive activity. There needs to be more awareness generally in order for us to start to shift that gap. Now, the Women of Color Founders Network now serves as a storytelling publication because for me, my intention for the platform is to serve as a platform to elevate and amplify the stories of women of color. Because I can't speak for women from other multicultural backgrounds, but I know for me personally, coming from a Southeast Asian country, a lot of us are brought up to be seen but not heard. And a lot of us women are basically told, you have contributed to society if you get married, have children, and become a housewife, right? And don't you dare even think about starting a business or having a career because that's a big no-no. So my work with the Women of Color Founders Network serves as a publication to encourage women of color founders to not be afraid to come forward and share their journeys and share their experiences, because a lot of us have got our voices stifled in the boardroom. Whether we're pitching for funding or whether we're presenting ideas to clients or our bosses, our voices get stifled. So the publication is there as a safe platform for the women to come forward and share their experiences and not be afraid to go, well, this is me, this is who I am, this is my journey, and this is why I have got such a successful business. Because that's the other thing that I found, having spoken to some of these women of color founders, is they often feel like they're bragging.
mm,
If they
yeah.
share their achievements and share their wins, they go, oh, am I being arrogant? Am I
Yeah.
bragging? Like,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. Because men, right from the day they are born, they are told they need to go there and scream out from the top of the mountains how great they are and what they've achieved in life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we women are said, no, don't say that, because then you're arrogant, then you're braggy, then you're showing off. So
Oh,
the
I hear
platform
you.
is there to amplify these stories.
Yeah.
Like every single woman that I have approached to ask if they like to be featured in the story, I have not had a single rejection.
Wow.
I have not had a single woman say no.
Mm,
Every single woman have come and told this is so much needed because we need a platform for us to be able to share our stories, because people are obsessed with overnight success, right? Because of social
yes.
media.
Oh,
What do you
yes.
see on Instagram and Facebook and all the
Mm,
social media platforms is the success story, but we never really see the pain and the tears and the frustration and all the behind the scenes, right?
mm,
And women of color have got so many more layers to unpack. The moment they conceptualize in their brain that, hey, I've got an idea for a business, that's when the challenges already start, because we carry with us so much baggage from society, pressures from family, pressures from friends. I remember when I said to my friends and family I was going to move overseas to work and carve a life out for myself, they were like, you're leaving? Why? You have got everything in Singapore. You've got government giving you money, you've got opportunity here, you've got a great
mm.
career. Why are you throwing all of that away to move overseas? But then I'm like, well, I don't want to be comfortable. I want to go out there and see what I can achieve. I want to break out of my comfort zone. And they would look at me and weird and go, you crazy. I like being crazy. I don't like being normal. I like being crazy. But back to your question about the whole DEI space. This is why it's needed, because I
Mm,
believe that if I can help shift the narrative even a little bit,
mm,
because for me, visibility equals awareness. Awareness equals more support. And that's what I really want for women of color founders, not just in Australia, but globally as well. Because the platform is featuring women of color founders from all parts of the world at the moment. And I think it's not just a challenge that we're facing in Australia. It's a global
mm,
challenge. And I know it's a David versus Goliath story here, but at the end of the day, I always believe that every little step counts. It
mm,
becomes a problem when we see it's too big of a problem and I'm just one person. I always believe that
mm.
one person has all it takes to start creating that ripple effect.
I love that. Ali, you've spoken a lot about stepping out and stepping into, your goals, despite what people were saying. And you're absolutely right from a cultural perspective. And Sandra and I have spoken about this quite a lot, where we, as women, if you have too much attention,
Mm.
that's a problem. If you have too little attention, you need to work a little. So it's like getting these mixed messages. Where exactly are we meant to be as women? But trying to define our own parts. I absolutely love that. And in that sense, like through your experience, everything that you've gone through, what actionable advice or tips do you have for women who may be facing similar challenges that you went through? What tools can they use to navigate and live a fulfilling life? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. We want to live a fulfilling life.
I think after having experienced like quite a few setbacks on my personal journey, I think the one thing that's always lifted me out of that darkness or that rut, if you like, is always connecting back to your why. Because when I first moved over here and got made redundant twice in my first two jobs in Australia, it really shook my confidence, because back home, the reason why I was nominated to get a transfer from Singapore to Sydney in that age in the agency that I was working at the moment is because I was one of the star children.
Mm,
But having been made redundant not once but twice with no explanation, no nothing, and it was way past probationary period,
wow.
it really made me question, am I worthy of doing this? Was the confident Ellie that left and told my friends, well, I want to break out of my bubble, is that really something that
Mm,
I was meant to be doing? So if anything, what really got me out of that and what really helped me to persevere on, because I could have very easily bought a ticket and flew 6 hours back to Singapore, right?
yeah. Yes.
But I didn't, because I reconnected to my why. I went, why am I here in the first place? And the why was so strong. It's because I really genuinely wanted to carve a future for myself outside of the bubble of my home country. I really wanted to challenge my perspective and other people's perspective of what they think I should be doing. So the moment I connected back to my why and go, no, I'm not going to be one of those housewives. Like I said to my husband, if you're marrying me because you think I'm going to be a housewife, you're speaking to the wrong lady. As much as I love my family, as much as I love, doing stuff around the house, that's not my calling, that's not my purpose. And if other
Mm.
women want to do that, that's completely fine. Absolutely fine. No judgment there.
Yeah.
But I guess connecting to your why will always resurface the reasons why you're in certain situations. Like if you're in a job that you're not happy with and you feel like you want to resign, connect to your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? And if it's business, then connect back to why you started your business in the first place. And I think that's so particularly important for female founders because we get rocked a lot.
Mm.
I was just talking to a mentee today, and she basically broke down in tears while we were having a conversation because she was a single mom growing a really successful business, and she was just saying, "This is so overwhelming. I don't know what to do. I'm just doing everything on my own." And I told her, reconnect back to your why. What makes you happy when you first get up in the morning, when you're getting up to work on your business? What makes you happy? And
Mm.
I asked her, connect back to your why. That's really important.
Mm.
And the other thing as well is, I love this quote by Vivian Green, is that, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, but learning how to dance in the rain.
I
Wow.
love that.
Oh, I
And,
love that.
and that means stepping back into your personal power, right? If it
Wow.
rains, get out and dance. Stop sitting there and playing victim, because I think a lot of us just default into victim mindset where we go, why me?
Mhm.
Why is this happening to me? Why not them? Why is this? But the moment you start to question and ask yourself this empowering questions like that, that's where you're giving up your personal power.
Mm.
And the one important tool that I'd like to leave behind for your audience is ask yourself empowering questions. So instead of saying, why me, why me, why me,
Mm.
ask, what lessons have I got to learn from this experience in order for me to evolve to the person that I was meant to be? Because I've learned this quote from a business coach whom I follow, and he says that if you can't even manage one troll on Instagram, imagine if you've got a following of 100,000 followers. Are you going to be able to handle that? Because if you're the one
Mm.
person who gets shaken by the one person who's trolling you, what happens if you have 100,000 followers and there's 10, 100 more of those trolls? Are you going to be able to handle that? So if you start looking at things in that perspective, nothing is going to be labeled good or bad anymore. Like, I don't label things as good or bad anymore. I just look at them as lessons that are here to
Mm.
teach me and help me evolve to become the great businesswoman that I want to be, the amazing mom that I want to be, the devoted wife that I need to be, the best friend that I need to be. So these are the two tools that I really want to leave behind. Ask empowering questions. Don't default to victim mindset, because the moment you default to victim, you're just crying in the corner, and that's not going to help anyone.
Mm.
Certainly not going to help you get anywhere. And the other thing is connect to your why, because I think that's really important. All of us have got a why that's very deeply buried within us because we get busy. We get busy in our day to day and we forget. So if you can take like 5-10 minutes, however long it takes, days even, to do the things that light you up, to connect back to your why, you'll be so surprised how quickly that spark comes back.
Ali, that was amazing. I feel like we just got a free 10-minute coaching session there.
I
I'm
love
And,
happy
you
it.
to
know,
pass on anything that's going to help others. 'Cause, that helped me in some of the deepest, darkest times of my life. So
wow.
happy to share all of that.
Thank
Oh, that's
you.
amazing. So connect to your why,
Mm.
step into your power, and dance in the rain.
Mhm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And Ali, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on Empowered Voices Amplified. I love how empowered you are and how, you always so generous with the things that you share. And to any of our listeners there, if you've listened to this and something has really struck a chord and you'd love to hear a little bit more or read more of Ali's story, head over to our website. We will have her story on the website. And if you're interested in hearing more or connecting with her, where can people find you, Ali?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm under Alicent Wong, or you can look me up on the Women of Color Founders Network. I'm on Instagram and on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. So if you want to connect with her, go right ahead. She shares brilliant content. I follow her.
Thank you.
So thank you. So thank you again for tuning in to another episode. If you've got any comments, suggestions, or questions, feel free to send us an email. In the meantime, do take care and stay in your empowered zone.
Thanks for having me.